Hey everyone, Joe here, and in this video I'm going to demonstrate the AI show notes writing functionality within Riverside. We're going to take a look at what it can come out with, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on whether it's worth using or not. At time of recording, the AI show notes writing functionality is available only in the Pro tier and above. So after you've recorded an episode of your podcast on Riverside, when you go into the episode, you'll find this AI show notes option if you're on the Pro tier and above. So let AI write your show notes. So just a case of clicking and generate show notes, and then it should take a minute or so and it will write them for us. Just bear in mind that it gives you timestamps, and if you haven't already edited, then the timestamps will be worthless after you've edited. So you might want to edit first, generate your show notes, and it's just going to skim through your content, and then it's going to give you your show notes. So you've got a summary with a short description of what goes on the episode. You've got bullet pointed takeaways for skimming, and then you've got chapters with timestamps. So if we have a look at another one, it's basically giving you a full summary of everything from the episode. So it's obviously not going to focus on one specific aspect. If you want there to be an aspect, there's no way of giving it certain instructions like there is with something like ChatGPT. It's similar to the Zoom AI summary functionality, except that it does format it in a way that would work for podcast show notes, and it tidies it up a little bit. It's a lot shorter than the Zoom AI summary. It's a lot less fluffy, and it's also a lot less fluffy than what ChatGPT tends to provide as well. It's got a nice structure. It's readable. No massive reams of paragraphs, and it's got a nice, very generous list of bullet points, which again are readable. If you look at these takeaways from this episode, creating clickable titles and valuable content helps to stand out in a niche space. Guests can be found through LinkedIn. So they make sense, and it's clearly picked out the important aspects of our conversation. The thing is, this isn't quite how I write show notes, or how I recommend people write show notes. For example, it's giving you the takeaways. So it's more like the answers to the questions rather than the questions themselves. So if it was me writing bullet points for show notes, I would say something like how to create clickable titles and so on. But here it's kind of giving you the answer. Like if the question was how to stand out in a niche space, the answer would be creating clickable titles and valuable content helps. That's not awfully valuable in terms of persuading a listener to listen to the podcast. These almost need sort of flipping round. So promoting the podcast on LinkedIn can help build a community and increase visibility. The point of show notes mainly is to get people to listen to the episode, and this isn't necessarily going to get people to listen. It'd be more like LinkedIn podcast promotion tips that I'd put as a bullet point. But that doesn't mean these are useless. It just means that they'll need a bit of rewording, in my opinion. And as I said, it doesn't focus on a specific aspect of the conversation. So ideally, when you have an interview podcast, you would zero in on a particular aspect of that conversation and that guest that you can turn into to the answer to a specific question. So for example, in this episode, we talked a lot about promoting a podcast on LinkedIn. So for my title and the show notes that I wrote separately, which I'll show you after, it was focused very specifically on LinkedIn, and the opening paragraph was something that would entice somebody who wants the answer to that LinkedIn question to click through, whereas this is all very general. And while it's a good summary, it can make it harder to sort of sell it to someone. And also you don't get the benefits of the SEO if you're focusing on a specific search term for your episode. You're going to have to do some editing of these show notes to get that in there yourself. And at the start, as I mentioned, I did make an edit to this episode in terms of the audio through Riverside, and it hasn't I deleted the first minute or so, and it hasn't shifted the timestamps back. So I don't normally edit through Riverside anyway, but if you do edit through Riverside, I recommend editing first before you generate the show notes. And of course, unless you say in the episode, it's not going to have your call to action at the end, and it doesn't have the links either, which is another important part of your show notes. I just want to show you how I put together show notes as a comparison. So as I mentioned, I've really zeroed in on this LinkedIn aspect of the conversation, and I've called it How to Grow Your Podcast Through LinkedIn. So even though obviously we cover a lot of other stuff, as you can see from these bullet points, again, it makes it more clickable and more searchable. So I've started LinkedIn is a powerful tool for building your network and your listener base if that's where your ideal listener spends their time. So immediately it's drawing the potential listener in to something that they already know, and then it's switching it around. But simply sharing a single post per week with a direct link to your audio episode isn't going to get you far. So it's switching it on its head, something they already know, and then suggesting that they might be sort of missing a key element of that. And then we go into the description of the episode. And as I mentioned again, with the bullet points, it's more about enticing the listener. So is video essential for podcasting 2024? It's going to make you want to listen to find out the answer. Tips on creating clickable, searchable episode titles. Again, you want those tips and things. So again, this is early days. I'm sure it'll be updated. But in my opinion, it's not quite fitting the brief of getting somebody to listen to the episode. And it's more of a, here's a summary of what happened in the episode. And then obviously we've got the call to action to listen and the links at the bottom, but you could paste those in after. So is it worth using these AI show notes? Well, if you're just starting out and you don't have the time to put into writing quality show notes every week, then I'd say it is worth making use of this functionality if you have the pro plan. It's a good start. If you were going to use these, I would suggest at the very least adding your call to action and links at the end, rewording these bullet points slightly to make them, turn them into sort of questions or make them more enticing, and maybe add a sentence or two at the beginning, just highlighting the main focus of the episode. But even if you pasted these in verbatim, to be honest, it would still be better than nothing, and still be better than, you know, one or two sentences if that's all you had time for. You want to get those key topics in there in bullet pointed form that your potential listener can skim through. One concern is that it might sort of lull podcasters into a false sense of security who do have time to write their own show notes, but they see that this option is available and think, oh, I don't have to write my show notes anymore. I can just click on this button and copy and paste these. But this isn't in their voice, and it's not optimized for their episode. So it's important, as with any kind of AI tool at the moment, that there is that human element in there as well. But again, if you already have the pro plan, or you feel that that extra $10 a month or so is worth the time it saves starting off with this as a base, then it's worth giving it a go. So let me know in the comments section below, have you used AI for your podcast in any way? It'd be great to know how people are using it and what your experiences have been. And don't forget to subscribe for more podcast production and workflow tips and tricks and tutorials. And as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.